Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukutali.
Hello, very good morning to you. This is Newsline, live as always from the Newsfirst studios in Dawson Street in Colombo. And this morning, once again, that Rajagiri flyover has conspired to make our guest late. This morning, on his way to our studios, hopefully, is Mr. Dinesh Gunawardena, the Member of Parliament, and we were hoping to talk politics with him. He isn't here. The last we spoke to him, he was still stuck on the Rajagiri flyover. And obviously that will feature in our discussions with him. But in the meantime, let's take a look at what the papers have to say. And it's the island. The island starts off, the headline story is, fresh bid to ascertain number of deaths, etc. during the war years. Do you know, I would have thought that by now this has been sorted out. But now they say, Shamindra Ferdinando is writing, and he says that a comprehensive survey is underway. The front page has got a picture of three of our leaders, President Chandrika Kumaratunga, President Maithripala Sirisena, and the Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, gathered at the Regal Cinema yesterday for the premiere of the latest Sinhala movie, and in English the title was Her, Him, the Other, directed by Asoka Handagama, and it was all in aid of reconciliation and the launch of the policy document there. And the front page news also still with the island, and this is an interesting story. The Prime Minister to launch Invest Sri Lanka Forum in Singapore. Zaki Jabbar is writing about that. The Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe is scheduled to visit Singapore this week in a bid to attract investments close on the heels of the foreign trade agreement between the two countries. He was expected to arrive in Singapore tomorrow and deliver the keynote address at the first Invest Sri Lanka Forum for this year at a star-class hotel on Friday. Now then, in Singapore, our information is that Mr. Arjun Mahendran, the runaway governor, wanted in Sri Lanka for questioning for something or other. He did connected with the bond scandal. And so we wonder whether there will be meetings. After all, it's an ideal opportunity for old friends to meet up and catch up and find out whether they'll be coming to Sri Lanka anytime soon. And the Cabinet also has passed a heavily diluted national audit bill, and during the day our news coverage will be bringing you an analysis of that, the national audit bill, which has been watered down. And still with the keeping with the island, we have the Court of Appeal yesterday extending the interim order preventing the arrest of the former Defence Secretary Gotabaya Rajapaksa until something else happens. This is over an investigation into the building of the D.A. Rajapaksa Memorial in Weera Ketia. So he's got an interim order that's been extended, and the joint opposition, and we shall ask Mr. Dinesh Gunawardena this when he gets here, he's hopefully cleared the traffic jam at the Rajagiri flyover, built at great cost and some consternation. The joint opposition is asking the government to make an official request to Singapore to hand over Mahendran. I don't think it's as simple as that. There are legal matters and international procedures and processes that must be met. And that's something, obviously, that Sri Lankan politicians find rather difficult to cope with. That is, sticking to the rules, the established process and the established procedure, and the written down rules. We've got a written down constitution. But yet, nevertheless, for example, the hallmark of this government's delivery of its promises during this Yahapalane terms has been a significant and real departure from due process and established procedure. when there are rules in place that preclude ministers from having meetings and the negotiations with the contractor on just around the corner from being awarded a contract, the rules do not allow ministers to have such discussions. Instead, the cabinet have something called a standing cabinet-approved procurement committee or a negotiating committee, and so on and so forth. These are necessary and very good checks and balances that have been put in place, but they've been put in place not to be abused. And these are the real procedures and processes that help us to maintain a level playing field, an equitable playing field for everyone concerned. And that is something very sad. If we follow what's happened right from the beginning of this Yapal government, it has been one thing has always stood out, and that is a departure from established process and procedure. When somebody has departed from that, you know jolly well that this is because that there is something completely untoward, and there's usually money hiding somewhere, lurking around the corner. And the politicians in our country really would be better advised to have a better and real attitude towards that, because the people, after all, have got information at their fingertips these days, and they can find out, and they do find out, and that will translate to less votes at a polling situation where both the major parties have found to their detriment that the public voted overwhelmingly in a show of protest against their policies and what they're doing, and more critically, what they're not doing. And that is that's the island. And we'll just take a look at the Daily Mirror. It's usually got lots of little articles in the beginning on the front page, a very busy page here. The Power Ministry wants 2.5 billion to buy extra electricity. Now really, 70 years after independence, and they are struggling to get the power sector right. Why is that? Why is that? Is that because of the diesel lobby? What is it? We don't really know. The questions are coming in, and there's a message here from Candy, who says that notice on Arjuna Mahendran should be sent care of Ranil Wickremesinghe. Well, that might be tongue-in-cheek, but it is a point that has not been lost on everybody here, because in the past assurances have been made by that same minister that Arjuna Mahendran hasn't done a Udayanga, as in run away, and that he will return after a wedding. But that was then. And right now, we don't really know whether he's attending to a wedding or whether he's merely taking a break before preparing himself to be given up for questioning. That's all he's wanted for, to help the police with their inquiries in connection with the Bondgate scam or the Bondgate fraud, described by the Attorney General's Department no less as one of the greatest financial scams ever to afflict the people of Sri Lanka since independence. That's one big ticket you got there. Here we go, the Daily Mirror. So after that story, there's tensions in Ampara town, and another one, Shashi Weerawansa's case for further trial being postponed on to the 23rd of April. And we have another report of a ASP nabbed when accepting a bribe from a spa owner. My goodness me. And former President Mahinda Rajapaksa is featured in an article about the liability management bill, which he says will give wings to government's borrowing spree. Well, that's a bit rich. He borrowed a lot too. So it does make sense when somebody who's done one thing is preaching about the exact same thing. We also have reports that the former finance minister made a statement to the Bribery Commission yesterday after spending about 4 hours. Not really sure why he went there or what it is, but that's the way it was there. And we have news from overseas that the Egyptian lover kills a Lankan maid. And these are, once again, highlights the various risks of going on there, and no doubt the new minister in charge of foreign employment, Harin Fernando, will have his work cut out for him this morning, and we hope that all the necessary investigations are carried out there, and that quick and expeditious steps are taken for the expeditious return of that Lankan maid who's working out there in the Middle East. And again, the Daily Mirror also comments on preventing Gota's possible arrest by the FCID, the Court of Appeal extending their interim order, as also reported in the other papers too. And here's an interesting one. The Prime Minister pledges to declare war on drugs. And that's a very, very important step, and we wish the Prime Minister all the very best in tackling a real problem which is affecting the youth, the future of the Sri Lankan population. Now then, the Daily News. It's about 12 minutes, and Mr. Dinesh Gunawardene is still not here. Nevertheless, the Daily News, this talking about the murder suspect in Boy's death. The body was found in Iranavilla jungle. And what a sad story that was. The young boy was only tiny, year 4 student, and the third of 5 children. And unfortunately, the body has now been found. So more work for the police in that area. We hope that they'll be able to get to the bottom of this drastic thing. And our thoughts, obviously, with that boy's family. And the big story there on the Daily News front page is that Minister tells European Elections Commission to order than appeal. And the parties are legally bound to protect the 25% of the women's quota. The Provincial Council's local government ministers asked the Elections Commission to order rather than appeal to political parties to appoint women through their list to complete the quota. Minister Faiza Mustafa hasn't been on the programme for a while, and we are looking forward to having the minister when he finds time in his rather busy schedule to come out here. Somerset Marisinger writes about reconciliation need of the hour, and the President referring to an incident in the Ampara region in that same speech. And even the Daily News is reporting on the ASP who was trapped in a bribery net. And the Daily News also talks about the Cabinet approving the amended audit bill. But like we said earlier, the Daily Mirror said this is a watered-down version. If you follow the news during the day, and especially primetime news bulletins, will no doubt carry an explanation about this National Audit Bill, which has had a torrid ride on its way to becoming an act. There's another article in the Daily News, and it says that the first ever surgery in Sri Lanka's history performed at the National Hospital of Sri Lanka on a stroke patient without opening up the brain has been successful. Wow, that seems to be a groundbreaking methodology here. And it says here, let me read it out. Sources said the stroke patient's life had been saved after a 15-minute brain surgery at the National Hospital. The patient had suffered a stroke due to a blood clot in the brain, and the surgery had been performed within 8 hours of hospital admission by the National Hospital, the surgeons Dr. Prasad De Silva and Dr. Premasri Bandanayaka. Now then, because the Member of Parliament Dinesh Gunawardena is still not here, we're going to play you a little clip about an anniversary that fell in place yesterday. Take a listen to this clip.
3 years ago, the Central Bank of Sri Lanka under Governor Arjuna Mahendran advertised a bond of 1 billion rupees for 30 years. When the auction closed, the governor decided to take up 20 times that value, 20 billion rupees. In the face of opposition from central bank personnel, he decided to reduce that to 10 billion rupees. Perpetual treasuries ended up with the lion's share of the 10 billion rupees, and part of it was achieved at an extraordinarily high rate of 12.05%. The rate prevailing before this auction was in the region of 9.85%. Significantly, the Bank of Ceylon, also a primary dealer, made a bid for and on behalf of perpetual treasuries. As public concern grew and the media interest reached new levels, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe decided the matter was worthy of his interest and intervention. On the 17th of March 2015, he made a speech in Parliament. The Prime Minister was unambiguous. He said that he insisted on a change of system and blamed it on corruption in the previous administration. Then Speaker Chamal Rajapaksa invited DEW Gunasekara to be chairman of COPE in order to investigate the bond auction of 27th February. On the day the DEW Gunasekara was to be tabled in Parliament, fortuitously for those involved in the bond scam, Parliament was dissolved on the 26th of June 2015. With that, the inquiries into the bond scandal came to a halt. A notable feature of the COPE report was that Arjuna Mahendran, under oath, stated that he had only followed the Prime Minister's instructions. 3 months after parliamentary elections on the 17th of August 2015, Prime Minister Wickremesinghe appointed Sunil Handunnetti as chairman of COPE to restart the investigation on the 26th of November 2015. On the 29th and 30th of March 2016, 2 more controversial bond auctions were held. In October 2016, the UNP members of COPE signed off the report but added footnotes challenging some of the conclusions of the COPE report. On the 27th of January 2017, responding to growing parliamentary and public sentiment, President Sirisena appointed a Presidential Commission of Inquiry to look into the issuance of bonds from February 2015 through to the 31st of March 2016. Over the 11 months that followed, the nation looked on in disbelief as the scale of the bond scam was revealed during the inquiry. On the 30th of December 2017, the Presidential Commission of Inquiry delivered the report to the President, who sent it to the Attorney General's Department. In January, the report was delivered to the Speaker of the House. Findings on key people in the report were Arjuna Mahendran acted mala fide and had shared sensitive information that had benefited perpetual treasuries. His son-in-law Arjuna Aloysius, part owner of perpetual treasuries, was alleged to have used his relationship with Mahendran to obtain inside information and make massive profits at the expense of government institutions. Ravi Karunanayake faces allegations of bribery. He was moved out of the post of Finance Minister and was given the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He then resigned in August 2017 following revelations during the inquiry. The Prime Minister was found to have been ill-advised by Mahendran and the Department Governor Samar Siri. 2 key recommendations were made by the Commission of Inquiry: a forensic audit of all the trades conducted by perpetual treasuries and other primary dealers involved in the bond auctions be carried out, to institute legal action against those accountable. To this effect, a notice has been issued on Arjuna Mahendran. However, efforts to locate Mahendran in Singapore have failed. He continues to be out of the reach of Sri Lanka's law enforcement. Arjuna Aloysius and Kasun Palisena are currently detained at the Colombo Remand Prison after bail applications were twice refused by the magistrate. Ravi Karunanayake is now a backbench MP in Parliament as investigations continue. Ranil Wickremesinghe has now become the Minister of Law and Order. 3 years after the biggest financial crime in Sri Lanka's history, and no one in government has been held accountable or successfully prosecuted.
And the last bit of that clip should have been that Ranil Wickremesinghe, the Prime Minister, will be in Singapore tomorrow. And we hope that he will, on his agenda, that he will be meeting with Arjuna Mahendran and persuading him to stop being so shameless and to come back and face the consequences of his actions. After all, his son-in-law is in the Colombo remand prison, and his daughter and the rest of the family must be rather at sea. And the elders, after all, must be the guiding force, and it's simply not on for Mr. Mahendran to be out of circulation, so to speak. After all, the Sri Lanka police only want him to make a statement. They want his presence here to help with their inquiries. And we must bear in mind that it is the public's monies that has been wasted and been robbed, and the hard-earned monies of the public, their retirement funds. It's not to be taken lightly, and certainly not to be taken in a flippant manner, because that is what actually has been going on. And the people are getting rather fed up of this attitude of those in power and those holding powerful positions, how they manage to grant patronage to their friends, their lackeys, and so on, and try and get away with it. But thanks to the availability of information at merely, within at the drop of a hat, you can, with a few presses of the buttons, you can have access to all sorts of information. And people have often asked us, what is it? Why is it? Who is the mastermind? Well, let's put it to you rather simply. On the 27th of February 2015, the central bank were the auction to raise 1 billion rupees, that's 1,000 million rupees, was in place. As is expected, you tend to get more bids than anything else. And there were bids. The indicative rate was about 9.85%, and lo and behold, when the auction closed, they found that there was 20 times that amount at play. And the governor actually Arjuna Mahendran wanted the central bank officials to take 20 billion, saying that it was required. The central bank officials completely balked at the idea and said no, that this would be disastrous. At which point the governor said, well, in that case, take 10 then, take 10 billion. Well, the problem is that when they did this, Arjuna Mahendran had no right to act solo. Even if, and the Prime Minister does confirm that he insisted that Arjuna Mahendran change the system. Well, there was a process that needed to have been followed, and Mr. Mahendran did not follow that process, and in fact the Presidential Commission of Inquiry faults him on that score and lays it on as his responsibility that it is he who passed sensitive information that benefited Perpetual Treasuries, a company that was half owned by his son-in-law and the son-in-law's father. So that was the first bad thing that happened. Now then, when the media started raising this matter, and by the 8th of March 2015, when it had reached a different height of concern, led by the media and by people in civil society and so on, but largely by the media, by Newsfirst, when we spread the message after an article in a newspaper. The Prime Minister who had already told Mr. Mahendran that he didn't want a conflict of interest scenario taking place, had asked him to ensure that his son-in-law divests himself from that business. Well, by the time the Prime Minister came to Parliament, because he felt it so necessary and so urgent and so a matter of national importance, that he came to Parliament and, quite rightly, made a statement. In that statement, even before that statement, the Prime Minister took no action. He could have asked Mr. Mahendran to explain exactly what has been done to avoid this conflict of interest scenario. Well, he didn't. Instead, the Prime Minister, as we now find out through the Presidential Commission of Inquiry, relied on the assurances given by Mr. Mahendran and the Deputy Governor at the time, Mr. P. Samarasiri. And the Presidential Commission of Inquiry says that the Prime Minister would have been better advised not to have relied on those assumptions. But the very fact that the Prime Minister didn't do anything about it, about this conflict of interest scenario, he's a trained lawyer, he didn't so much as have it checked out, even through his office, somebody independent of the of the central bank. Nothing was done. And it is precisely because of that the second and the third bonds in a year later, on the 29th and the 31st of March 2016, and where the amounts involved was far, far bigger, this whole problem could have been solved by March, and the losses could have been minimal at the time. But to our lasting regret, our Prime Minister, the person in charge of the subject of the central bank, did not do anything. On that note, we're going for a break. Stay tuned. We'll be back after this short message.
Dolly.
And welcome back to Newsline. Mr. Dinesh Gunawardena still hasn't reached our studios, and when he does, he'll be taking part in a recording which will be broadcast on Thursday night, the hot seat at 9:30, straight after the news. Now then, some of the messages, I'm going to read some of these messages. And this one's from Upcountry, from Nurelia. Parliament is like a mental hospital, and the majority of ministers behave as if they don't have any responsibility. I think you'll find the whole of Sri Lanka agreeing with that comment. Another one. We have a right to know the difference between how Dr. Kumaraswamy and Arjuna Mahendran used the central bank credit cards for their personal benefits, such as shoes, clothes, hotels and food. This should be done for the sake of honest people like Indrajit Kumaraswamy. Well, yes, these are small, minute details. We would rather they prosecute somebody responsible for this sorry mess, recover the monies, not just the 12 billion that is supposed to be stuck at the central bank, but there's far more. Nobody's talking about the profits that was made on the bond issued on the 31st of March. There's another 6 billion there. No one's talking about that, least of all Ranil Wickremesinghe or Malik Samarawekrama, both of whom confirm that they've got 12 billion stuck in the central bank system. Well, that I hope we've explained to you today how very simply the minister in charge of the subject of the central bank should have taken action. His inaction paved the way for this fraud to be perpetrated, sustained over a period of another 15, 16 months, and resulting in this astonishing loss of funds to the Republic of Sri Lanka. Sad, sad and more sad. On that note, that's the way it was on Newsline today, and we'll see you back again tomorrow morning. Take care and God bless.
News First, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.